On paper, this might be the best Orioles bullpen since the prime of the Buck Showalter days. I'll tell you why coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, March 20th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are doing our final Orioles positional preview episode of this week. It is the bullpen preview to finish things off. We'll talk about why this pen is so strong, the return of Félix Bautista, and what the Orioles will do with the open spot in their pen now that Andrew Kittredge will be starting the year on the injured list. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So we're going to preview the bullpen today. Is the last of our 5-part position preview series. If you haven't checked out the other ones, first of all, when you do, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen. Leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps the show. And if you could like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, that helps us out as well. There's been 4 episodes already. We did a catcher, first base, DH preview along with an outfield preview last week. And then this week, it's been infield preview on Tuesday, starting rotation preview on Wednesday, and here the bullpen preview on Thursday to finish things off. So all 5 of those preview episodes are now in your feed if you want to go ahead and check those out. But how we basically format this, we talk about the main guys in the bullpen. Then we're going to talk about the lower leverage and the depth pieces, and then any kind of prospects who could come up and help this bullpen at any point in 2025. So we begin with the main guys in the pen, who are locks to be in this bullpen, who will be in there with high leverage spots. And I would say with opening day, there's probably 5 names that fall into this list. And we begin with Félix Bautista, who I will admit is not a lock for the opening day roster, although he's trending further and further towards that direction as we sit now a week from opening day. But as long as the health is good, he's going to be the Oriole closer in 2025. The Orioles getting Bautista back from Tommy John surgery that he underwent in October of 2023. He missed the entirety of the 2024 season, but he seems to be ready to go. Now, he's not a guarantee for the opening day roster. He has appeared in 4 spring training games so far, and Brandon Hyde had said he'd like to see him get into 6 or 7. Now, Bautista also threw 2 backfield bullpen sessions as well, so that adds up to 6. So theoretically, maybe if he pitched one more time over the next 4 games, you could feel good putting him on the roster, but we shall see. I think he feels good. The velocity is not all the way back. He's more sitting 98 as opposed to his 99 to 100, but he's got the splitter. He's got the slider. He's added a cutter to his repertoire. So a 4-pitch mix for Félix Bautista. Listen, this guy was the best reliever in baseball in 2023. I don't know if we can expect him to come back to that in his first year back from Tommy John. Like, the Orioles have already said they're going to slow play him early, whether or not he begins the year on the IL. If he does, it'll be a quick IL stint and then he'll be back. But if he is active for opening day, he's not going to pitch in back-to-backs early in the season. He's not going to have any multi-inning outings early in the season. The Orioles are going to be careful. So for the first couple months of the year, even if Félix is healthy, he's not going to get every single save chance that comes up for the Orioles. And we'll get to in a moment who will get those chances. But having Bautista back in this bullpen, a guy who threw 61 innings, had a 1.48 ERA with a 46% strikeout rate before his injury in 2023, is ridiculous. And I would think by June or so, or at least by the All-Star break, the Orioles are going to let Félix rip fully as long as he's feeling healthy and start with those classic 2-inning outings where it's a tie game on the road. Félix pitches the bottom of the 9th. The Orioles get 1 run in the top of the 10th. And then with the zombie runner on, he strikes out 3 batters in the bottom of the 10th and the Orioles win the game. He'll start pitching back-to-back. So he'll get closer to what he was, and you deploy him for the second half in the postseason to be the Félix that we know and love. I think that is the plan for him this year. And very excited to just get the mountain back because, the Orioles bullpen was okay at times last year, but we know Craig Kimbrell was a struggle. Kimbrell, who just signed a minor league deal with the Atlanta Braves, so he might have a job heading into the season after the disaster that was the end part of last year. But they sorely missed Félix. It's going to be great to have him back. Now, when Félix is not pitching back-to-backs, or maybe if he does start the year with a quick injury list trip to just make sure he is ready, I think Seranthony Dominguez is certainly going to be one of the names that fills in for some saves. Dominguez came over at the deadline last year and traded with the Phillies for Austin Hayes. And he did have 10 saves with the Orioles last year, 22 and 2/3 innings. He had a 3.97 ERA with a 29% strikeout rate and a 9% walk rate. Now, he's had a bad spring stats-wise. Like his ERA is over 20 at this point in 5 or so outings. But he's working on things. He's adding a new curveball. He does have a home run problem, and that's the thing that's going to bite him. That's the thing that bit him at times in Philadelphia when he wasn't going his best. But it's a four-seam fastball at 98. There's a sinker, a slider. He's added that new curveball. It's really good stuff for Dominguez, who does become a free agent after this 2025 season. He's got closer upside. Again, he saved 10 games down the stretch for the Orioles. I've talked about it. I'm not super concerned about the struggles he has had in spring so far. He's got a lockdown spot at the back end of this bullpen. If we see struggles like this start to happen in regular season games that matters, then it'll be concerning for me. Otherwise, spring training stats really don't matter much. Guys are working on things. Dominguez is certainly working on things, and we'll just kind of see where it goes from there. But he could get some of those chances. If the ninth inning is maybe more lefty heavy in terms of the hitters that come up and Félix Bautista is not available, Gregory Soto is also certainly someone who the Orioles could go to. Another reliever they acquired in a trade with the Phillies last year at the deadline, who's also going to become a free agent after this 2025 campaign. People look at Soto's stats and they think, oh, he wasn't very good with the Orioles either. It takes just a little bit of digging to see what he really was, because he was pitching in high leverage. He had the highest leverage index of any Oriole reliever for the final few weeks of the 2024 season, basically meaning for the last 2 or 3 weeks of September, Brandon Hyde was putting Gregory Soto in the biggest spots in every game because that's how well he was pitching. And again, his ERA didn't look great, but that was because right after the trade, he had 3 consecutive just abysmal outings out of the bullpen. The Orioles were clearly trying to work with stuff, change the pitch mix. He was not comfortable yet in that Oriole uniform. It was just a disaster for 3 outings. After those 3 outings, the Orioles stuck with him. They got him some low leverage chances to get his feet back under him. For the rest of the year, after the 3 terrible outings, 16 1/3 innings, a 1.10 ERA with a 31% strikeout rate and a 6% walk rate. That is elite reliever stuff in those 16 2/3 innings. So you take out those first 3 right after a trade when he was just kind of getting his feet wet, and he was one of the Orioles' most dominant relievers down the stretch. The sinker at 97, plus a really good slider that the Orioles made even better, plus a four-seamer. He's got a couple more pitches that he likes to toss in from time to time. That's really the main 3-pitch mix for Soto. I'm excited for him. He is going to get some save chances, but mostly he's going to be the main high-leverage lefty for this Oriole bullpen now that Danny Coulombe is gone. And I think he does have potentially a higher upside than Coulombe. I mean, Soto was an all-star when he was with the Tigers. He was good with the Phillies for a while until last year. This is potentially still a really high upside reliever, just like Seranthony Dominguez. Now, the Orioles hope that Yennier Cano can be the stabling force as well. And he may get a save chance or 2 early in the season when Félix is not available. I think the Orioles prefer him in that 7th or 8th inning role that he's locked down since coming up early in the 2023 season. Now, Cano, at least at this point, is no longer the all-star reliever we saw that first year, but he's still really good. A 3.15 ERA in 60 innings last year, 26% strikeout, 10% walk. He just really needs to find his command from 2023. He had a 4% walk rate that year. It jumped to almost 10% last year. That is not good. That is the number one biggest by far reason he was just less effective in 2024 than he was in 23. But hopefully with Soto, with Dominguez, with Bautista back, with some other guys we'll talk about, there should be a little less pressure on Yennier Cano this year. He should have to shoulder a little bit less of the workload out of the Oriole bullpen this year, and that should allow that arm to rest up a little better and for him to be more effective as the season goes on. I think that's going to be a good sign for this Oriole team. We know it's the dominant sinker at 96. He's got the changeup, the slider, the four-seamer. He's also added a cutter this offseason to add to his mix to try and continue to do a better job of getting left-handed hitters out. That was the big point for Cano. But I do think that he's going to just be in a better spot this year because there are other high leverage guys, more high leverage guys around him. And then I'm not quite sure what Cionel Perez's full role will be in this bullpen this year. He's going to be the number 2 lefty behind Gregory Soto. He's going to get some high leverage chances, maybe a save chance or two for him early in the year. If there's a lot of lefties coming up in the 9th and both Félix and Soto aren't available, I could see Perez getting that chance, but he's really going to be more in that number 2 lefty role. It was a weird season last year, 53 2/3 innings. He had an injury very early in the year after his first outing where he spent some time on the IL. 4.53 ERA, but also a 3.30 FIP, which tells you he got pretty unlucky on the mound last season. Now, the issue was a 12% walk rate for Cionel Perez. His big highlight was he did not allow a home run in the entirety of last year, pitched over 50 innings and no home runs. That's nice. You can send him out there and know, hey, it's not like he's going to give up a lot of big innings because ball just does not leave the ballpark because he's got that power sinker from the left side that is so hard to hit in the air and hit in the air a long way. But he just needs to get those walks down. The reason why he was still a productive enough reliever that could stay in the bullpen of a playoff team with a 12% walk rate and a 19% strikeout rate is because he literally did not allow a home run. So even though you're putting free guys on and you're not missing a lot of bats, if when the ball goes in play, it's not going to be a homer, balls are still going to end up in outs and you're still going to get productive outs for your team. That's why he stuck around. If his walk rate, remains at 12% and his strikeout rate remains around 20% and the ball starts to leave the yard even just a little bit, I'm not seeing how Perez is never going to have like a giant home run rate just because of his stuff and the sinker. But if the ball starts to leave the yard even a little bit, Perez becomes a serious problem for this bullpen, and a guy with a bullpen with not a lot of roster flexibility. A lot of these pitchers are out of options, can't just be sent to AAA. Perez is a guy who could be hanging to a thread a little bit. And if the home run comes back to bite him and he continues to walk guys, he's going to be in trouble. And it's really hard to continue this long stretch of not giving up homers, which is why it's important for Perez to expect he's going to give up a couple of home runs this year. He needs to get the walk rate at least down below 10% from the 12% it is, just to be a more effective reliever. But we know he's going to get grounders. He's going to get lefties out, sinker at 96, a slider, a four-seamer. And guess what? Perez has also added a cutter this offseason. It has looked mighty nasty so far in spring training. So maybe that's another way, maybe a pitch he feels he can command better to get some of those walks down this year. And then the other guy to mention, initially we thought there'd be 6 locks in the bullpen, and this would include Andrew Kittredge, the veteran right-hander who the Orioles signed to a 1-year, $10 million deal this offseason. But Kittredge is going to begin the year on the injured list. He was feeling some knee soreness and inflammation a few weeks ago in spring, got a couple of doctors to look at it. And basically there was some cartilage and other stuff in his knee that need to be cleaned up. It wasn't any serious ligament damage. It wasn't ACL surgery, MCL surgery, anything like that. It was more of a knee scope and knee cleanup surgery that he got done a couple of weeks ago. He said initially the timeline was anywhere from June to after the All-Star break, but the procedure went really well and his swelling went down faster than they even thought. So it actually upped his timeline. I think Kittredge talked about it last week about how the timeline already looks really, really good. So we could get Andrew Kittredge back at some point in May, which would be a really good another addition for this Oriole bullpen, because he was kind of brought in with, Coulomb and Webb gone to be the one veteran piece that they went and added. And he was great with the Cardinals last year. Kittredge had a 2.80 ERA in 70 2/3 innings with St. Louis last season. He was an all-star back in 2021 with the Rays. It's a very slider-heavy approach. He gets a lot of swings and misses outside the strike zone. Nobody got hitters to chase more pitches outside the zone than Andrew Kittredge in Major League Baseball last year. Plus a sinker at 95. He's got a four-seamer. He's got a cutter. He also used to have a changeup, and he did struggle against lefties last year. I think he should bring that changeup back. It could make him better against lefties when he is out there. But when he's back, he's going to play a high-leverage role and maybe not close for this team when they need it. They've got other guys to do that, but another 7th, 8th inning guy. And, even with Kittredge out for a while, FanGraphs now has him projected for around 39 innings this year. So that would get him back, late May, early June, and then pitching the rest of the year. FanGraphs still has this bullpen as the projected number 2 bullpen in all of Major League Baseball behind the Minnesota Twins, who despite their other flaws, have a fantastic pen, especially at the back end in the Twin Cities. That's how good this bullpen is on paper. Number 2 projected bullpen behind the Twins, because you think about it, even if you don't get full 2023 best reliever in baseball, Félix Bautista, the stuff is so good. He's still going to be dominant and still going to be one of the very best closers in baseball if he is healthy. You add that to, if you get good Seranthony Dominguez, good Gregory Soto, which we saw last year when they came over to the Orioles, you add Kittredge to that at some point, you have Yennier Cano. Like, and again, I put CNL Perez in this group. You've got by June, you've got 6 legitimate high leverage relievers out of your 8 guys in the bullpen. Like, those are 6 guys who, if the Orioles needed them to, I would be okay with coming in to save a game in a save situation in the 9th inning. Not a lot of teams have 6 guys in their bullpen besides like the Dodgers that they can count on that. So this is going to be a really good pen, but there is also some depth here because as I mentioned, only 6 spots there and really only 5 because Kittredge won't be ready for opening day. So who's going to fill those other 3 spots at the beginning of the season? And who could come up from Norfolk to kind of help give some of these other relievers a break throughout the season? We will talk about that coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. And say you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who has delivered incredible results. And posting a job at Upwork, it's free and it's simple. And within a day, multiple qualified candidates are right there for you to choose from. So visit upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's upwork.com, upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. So we're here with the Orioles bullpen preview, and we move from kind of the main guys in that pen to more of the depth pieces. Because as I mentioned, with Félix Bautista, Seranthony Dominguez, Gregory Soto, Yennier Cano, and CNL Perez, those are 5 of your 8 opening day relievers. Kittredge will be on the IL to start the year. At some point, he'll be a main part of the pen, but not for the first month or 2 of the season. So we go to who is next. And I think the first name is Keegan Akin. Now, you could make an argument that Akin should be one of the bullpen locks, and he should have been in that first group I talked about. And I will absolutely hear that argument because he was great last year. Here are the 2 reasons why I'm perfectly projecting Akin to be in the opening day bullpen. And quite frankly, he is going to have a spot in this opening day bullpen. But here's the 2 reasons why he's not in the first group. Number 1 is he has options to the minor leagues. This is his final year of minor league options here in 2025. Not a lot of the other guys in this bullpen do. Now, Cano and Bautista do, but those are guys you don't really want to option. Dominguez, Soto, Perez, Kittredge, Albert Suarez, Bryan Baker, the list goes on. They do not have options. So the roster flexibility that Akin will give you allows him to, even if he makes the opening day roster, be sent down if you need a fresh arm, if somebody gets injured, whatever it may be. The flexibility could work against him a little bit because there's so little of it in this bullpen. But if he pitches well enough, he's not going to have to think about that if he pitches as well as he did last year. And the other thing is, a lot of his success, basically all of his success, came in low leverage roles last year, which is fine. You need guys to eat up innings in low leverage. But I think the question for Akin, even though I just talked about all these guys already in the pen who can pitch in high leverage, the question moving forward for Akin, once we get to 2026 maybe, and Soto's gone, and Dominguez is gone, and they don't have Andrew Kittredge back, and maybe there's some questions with CNL Perez. Like, can Akin step forward into a number 1 lefty type of role, or is he just more of this front of the bullpen kind of guy? Because he's going to be like your classic Swiss Army knife pitcher out of the pen. He doesn't have splits issues, so he gets righties and lefties. He can go multiple innings. He can go 1 inning. He can pitch in the 5th. He can pitch in the 10th if you need him to. And he was fantastic last year. 78 2/3 innings, a 3.32 ERA, a 31% strikeout rate, and a 6% walk rate. Those are incredible numbers for a bulk reliever who threw almost 80 innings. However, most of those innings came in low leverage. FanGraphs splits up your outings by low leverage, medium leverage, and high leverage. 60 of Akin's 78 2/3 innings were in low leverage spots, not even medium, in low leverage spots. He was coming in, starter gets bounced in the fourth inning. Aiken comes in, finishes the fourth, finishes the fifth, pitches into the sixth, then hands it over to the back end of the bullpen. Orioles are up 7-1. Aiken comes in, pitches the seventh, eighth, and ninth innings to finish out the game. Like, that was a lot of what Keegan Aiken was doing last year, and he was doing a great job at that and keeping the other members of the bullpen fresh enough to get the Orioles through a season. But he only pitched 4 2/3 innings of those 68 2/3 were in high leverage spots. And when he did pitch in high leverage, those are the times where he didn't pitch well. He blew a save against the Nationals. He blew a save against our new friend Tyler O'Neill at Fenway Park, and a couple of big save chances that he got last season. He didn't come up big. He was great in the other spots, but didn't come up big. So it's going to be really interesting. Do they try him in those spots? Do they still they have enough arms to still keep Aiken away and put him in the same exact role this year that he had last year, but does he end up getting optioned a couple of times because he has that flexibility? But it's that four-seam fastball, 94 miles an hour, huge ride, the slider, the changeup. I've come around on Keegan Aiken. He was great. We'll see if he can repeat it, and we'll see if the role is the same in 2025. Now, Albert Suarez is going to be on this opening day roster. And we talked about Suarez yesterday when we did the starting rotation preview, because the Orioles' number 5 starter spot is open, and it's basically down to Cade Povich versus Albert Suarez. And I talked about how I would prefer the Orioles put Cade Povich in that spot. And after Povich threw 5 no-hit innings on Tuesday night in what is potentially his final spring training start, I think that's an even bigger push towards Povich getting that role. And I also think that even though the Orioles are definitely considering giving Suarez the rotation spot, the roster just fits better if Povich, who has never really pitched in relief, gets the number 5 spot and has pitched really well this spring and really well down the stretch last year. And Suarez, who definitely has some questions attached to him, who pitched in relief last year, just goes into the bullpen as like the long man and another kind of Swiss Army knife because he's out of options. You want to keep him on the roster. He's going to be on this team somehow. I think it just fits better to have him in the bullpen. Now, he pitched in all roles last year. He had a 3.70 ERA in 133 2/3 innings, and he made 8 relief appearances. He was good in those too. 11 2/3 innings, 3.09 ERA out of the bullpen. That was totally fine. We saw him pitch long relief. We saw him pitch in that game I mentioned with Keegan Aiken against the Nats. Suarez pitched the 10th and the 11th innings in high leverage. Like, he bounced all around doing different things, and I think that'll be nice to have in the bullpen. And at worst, he's going to be a long man in there, which is really nice to have early in the year. That's my other point about Suarez being in the bullpen. If they give Suarez the number 5 spot in the rotation, it probably means they're going to send Cade Povich to AAA to begin the year. I don't think they're going to start him in the bullpen. But early in the year, when guys are still kind of fully building up in March and April, starts don't go as long. A guy that would usually go 6 innings might only go 5 in a start, or a guy that would usually go 5 might only go 4, and you need longer style relievers in the bullpen. So if you have both Aiken and Suarez in the bullpen to begin the year, that covers you if you need 2 or 3 innings out of a guy because a starter goes short early in the season while they're building up. That could be really, really big. Suarez could be huge in that role for the Orioles, and that's what I think he'll be for most of the year. Now, he could be someone who, just like Cionel Perez, could be on the roster bubble at some point if he doesn't pitch well. He's 35. It was kind of a flash in the pan last year when he was a reliever. It was fastball at 94, then a lot of changeups, and then cutters, and then he barely threw the curveball when he pitched in relief last year. We know he's added that slurve pitch to his mix this spring as well. But you got to give, he's deserved a roster spot. I think it should be in the bullpen, and then we just kind of see where it goes from there. So that takes up 7 of the 8 spots. The final spot is basically down to 3 pitchers. And remember, there's still an outside chance that Félix Bautista also starts the year on the injured list. So if that happens, there still would be 2 spots open. But I think if you're assuming 1 spot open for Andrew Kittredge, there's really 3 pitchers, I think, still in the mix. The first one is Bryan Baker. I think he's the leader right now to get that open bullpen spot. He's been really good in spring so far. His fastball's up to 99. He's throwing the slider. He's got a new and better changeup grip that has allowed him to get more command. 5.01 ERA in 23 1/3 innings in the big leagues last year. Wasn't a big part. He was very up and down last season. And he had a 5.17 ERA in AAA, although it did come with a really, really good 32% strikeout rate for him in Norfolk with some walk problems. But Baker is out of options for the first time this year, so they can't just freely send him back and forth to AAA. It's been reported that other teams are potentially salivating and waiting on Bryan Baker. If he does not make this team, they're going to try to trade for him or claim him on waivers. I think with the open spot now vacated by Kittredge to begin the year, I think it just makes the most sense with Baker looking good this spring and being out of options to give him that final spot. He's also someone who can pitch into a second inning of work if you need him to. He's done it before, and I think he does make the most sense. But another guy in the mix is Matt Bowman, veteran, kind of sidewinding, funky right-hander who the Orioles brought in late last season as their bullpen was sustaining injuries, and he pitched well. He had a 3.45 ERA and 15 2/3 innings down the stretch for the Orioles, pitched for 4 different teams last year. He is here on a split deal as a non-roster invite, so it's a minor league deal that he'd get paid a little over $1 million if he makes the major league roster. But even though he is out of options, he's on a minor league deal. So when you're here on a minor league contract, you can begin the year in AAA Norfolk. However, once you are called up to the big leagues, you can't just be optioned back down. So for Bowman, with that funky kind of sinker, sweeper, splitter, cutter mix from the right side that I think is real, makes him super, super tough on righties, I think he's going to pitch a lot for the Orioles this year. And I think if he starts in AAA, he'll be the first guy called up if they need another reliever. But the thing is, because he can be freely sent to AAA to start the year and Baker can't, I think that's why the Orioles would rather, you'd rather kick the can down the road on roster decisions as long as possible. You'd rather hold on to as many guys as you can. So I think they'd rather keep both of them because they know Baker's going to get claimed on waivers if they DFA him. So you put Bowman in AAA, you put Baker on the team, and then Bowman you call up when you need him. And the last guy on the list is Roansy Contreras. Kind of an interesting case, right? Orioles claimed him twice off waivers this offseason. Former good starter with the Pirates. Things kind of fell apart with the Angels and Pirates last year. He's only 25 years old. Orioles are building him up as kind of at least long relief man, if not a starter here in spring. It's fastball at 95. There's a slider, sinker, changeup, curveball, sweeper. He's still trying to figure out what his pitch mix is. It was something that was really an issue for him with the Angels last year when they put him in the bullpen, and he just didn't know what to throw. He had too many pitches. He was adding pitches. He was kind of all messed up, it seemed like. He does have a path to the roster because there's a situation where, say, Félix is also on the injured list, and the Orioles say, well, we'll keep Baker and Contreras because Contreras is also out of options. So same reason you would want to keep him. Or maybe if Suarez goes to the rotation and Povich goes to AAA, there becomes a long man spot open. That's another way Roansy Contreras could get on this roster. I still think if the Orioles are as healthy as possible, which is Félix being good, I think he's going back on waivers, and the O's just hope he passes through and they can keep him. But it will be interesting to see what they do with him. If he does go down to AAA and pass through waivers, I think he'll probably pitch for the Orioles at some point this year, but it's all a question of can they hold on to him. And then beyond those guys, there is some other depth. I wanted to talk about Colin Selby because something clearly went wrong for the right-hander this spring. Selby came over to the Orioles on waivers last year. He pitched a few times in the regular season. The stuff was electric. Fastballs and sinkers up to 97 with crazy slider and curveball break, awesome stuff out of the bullpen. And he was so good that the Orioles actually put Selby on the postseason roster. Now, he didn't pitch in either game, but he basically took Matt Bowman's spot and made it on the playoff roster. So he came into camp. I knew he had minor league options, but I was like, if there's an opening, which there ended up being with Kittredge getting hurt, I was like, Colin Selby could be a guy who takes a final bullpen spot to begin the year. And then Selby had one outing in spring. He didn't even finish the inning and he gave up 4 runs and then was immediately optioned down to AAA to minor league camp early in the spring. And we haven't seen him since. It's very odd for a guy who was on your playoff roster last year and seemingly would have a serious chance, especially with Kittredge out, to make this roster. It was so odd that a month ago, they sent him down to AAA camp. So I think there's got to be an injury or something happening here with Selby that we just haven't heard about. I think it takes him out of the conversation for opening day. If he gets healthy at some point, I love Colin Selby. I think he's going to be a good reliever in the big leagues, but a lot of mysteries and question marks around him. And then there's just some other non-roster invitee guys who might have something going on, like Dylan Coleman, great stuff, no command. Rodolfo Martinez, a righty, throws 100 with no command. Corbin Martin, former top prospect. He's got a 91-mile-per-hour slider, but needs to find another pitch. Levi Stout, a righty who I really like. High ride fastball, just needs another better out pitch among his secondaries. Those are guys who are going to begin the year probably in the Norfolk bullpen and could come up and help the Orioles at any time. But there also are some interesting prospects. There's always interesting relief prospects. The Orioles have some in camp and otherwise this year. We'll talk about those guys to finish off the show coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. The day is here. The day is here. March Madness is here. And FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who is cutting down the nets. Now, I've got my eyes on some underdogs. Now, I wouldn't take my bracket picks. I haven't won a pool in a while, but I do watch a lot of college basketball. And I'll tell you right now, FanDuel makes it easy to back those underdogs like UC San Diego, like Drake, like Akron, some of the ones that I am on. And there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is so simple to use. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
So to finish off our 2025 bullpen preview, wanted to discuss the prospects that could play a part in this. We start with Chase McDermott, who I talked about yesterday on the starting rotation preview. He is still a starting pitching prospect, full stop, but he's been throwing recently. He's probably going to begin the year on the injured list, dealing with a lat issue early in camp, but really good stuff from the right side, good fastball, good breaking stuff, really good changeup. He'll probably be in the Norfolk rotation when he gets healthy. But I talked about this yesterday. I see McDermott potentially on the DL Hall path at some point where they keep trying him as a starter. They keep trying him as a starter. The injuries and the command issues just beat him down. So he becomes a full-time reliever, and that stuff just eats out of the bullpen, and he becomes like a back-end elite reliever. The Orioles were doing that with Hall before they traded him. Not really sure why the Brewers haven't succumbed to that at this point, although Hall is going to start the year on the 60-day injured list. No surprise with that, unfortunate again for DL Hall. But I see that from Chase McDermott. And even if he's going to be a starter long-term, there could be some point in the second half here in 2025 where McDermott's healthy, ready to go, and they just add him to that bullpen, and he lets it eat, and it's really, really nasty. Justin Armbruster is another one of those guys who, has had starter stuff, got himself to AAA in 2023, then just had his command evade him for Norfolk last year in the rotation. He'll also probably start the year as a starter. But at some point, if the command still is an issue, he's going to have to get moved to the pen. He's got good stuff, and it could play up in the bullpen as well. Then there are the two guys who the Orioles added to the 40-man roster this offseason, besides Brandon Young, he's going to be a starter when he gets to the big leagues. But in terms of the other two relievers that they added to the 40-man, the first one is Cade Stroud. He did have a 6.80 AAA ERA last year in 41 innings, but it came with a 31% strikeout rate and a 14% walk rate. It's a really interesting pitch mix, a cutter at 92, fastball at 96, and a curveball, sweeper, and changeup to go with it. He's a little erratic, but the stuff is really intriguing. Orioles really like that cutter, and he's someone we could definitely see this year because he now has a 40-man roster spot, because he's not a starter anymore. He has been fully converted to a reliever, and he'll have minor league options, and if he's already on the 40-man, you might as well get that clock ticking. I think the Orioles are going to option him up and down to give some flexibility and help out the bullpen this year. And then Luis Gonzalez, the more veteran left-hander, was also added to the 40-man. Now, Luis Gonzalez is 30 or 31 at this point, but he'd been in the Orioles organization for a while. Then he left. He played in other countries. He played for the Giants in AAA for a bit. And the Orioles signed him back last year, and he was tremendous. 60 innings in AAA, a little bit of an inflated 4.50 ERA, but a 29% strikeout rate to just a 5% walk rate. 93 on the fastball from the left side with a slider and a changeup to go with it. I really do think the Orioles are going to have three lefties in this opening day bullpen. Gregory Soto, Cionel Perez, and Keegan Aiken are going to be those three guys. I think Luis Gonzalez is the next lefty up. If any of those guys get injured or start to struggle and the O's make a change, the next lefty, if they truly want another left-hander specifically in the bullpen, Gonzalez, because he has now been added to the 40-man roster this offseason, he is the next guy in the pecking order. And if he doesn't work out, you can option him to AAA and try somebody else, but he is really that next guy up. I think, especially with Danny Coulomb gone, there's a little more space in that bullpen for a lefty. I think Gonzalez will definitely be pitching for the Orioles this year. And then there are a lot of other young guys who you could see come up and pitch in relief at some point this year. I just wanted to point out two main ones, both who were mostly in Double-A Bowie last year, but could go to Norfolk and then really make the jump this season. Keegan Gillies is one of them, former Locked on Orioles podcast guest. High octane stuff as a righty, high 90s fastball, super high ride, interesting breaking stuff, just still working on some things. He'll be in AAA Norfolk, you would think, this year. And then Cameron Weston, who pitched in the prospect breakout game on Saturday, if you caught that. Funky right-hander, still more in a starter mold now, but I think will be a reliever long-term. Really good splitter, interesting high ride fastball from like a sidearm-ish slot. It's a slider. I really love Cameron Weston. I've talked about him a lot. He's another guy who, again, will probably be in Norfolk potentially to begin the year. But if things go well, like he could be an Orioles bullpen guy by the second half. So just wanted to shout out those two names as well. But that'll do it for today's episode. Again, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the show wherever you listen or watch. If you have any thoughts about the show, mailbag questions, want to talk Orioles, whatever it may be, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Got one more episode coming up this week. That'll be a Friday show. We're going to take a look at the Orioles offseason. I think at this point, right, we'll be 6 days from opening day when that episode comes out tomorrow. Unless the Orioles have a really late move coming, it seems like their offseason is done at this point. They did a great job adding depth, but they also did not replace Corbin Burnes. They did not get another ace to put atop this rotation. And now with Grayson Rodriguez out to begin the year, it looks a little shakier. So I'm going to give out my full grade and my full look at the Orioles encompassing offseason, kind of grade out how they did and what comes next for them as they look forward to potentially even the trade deadline this year. That'll be on tomorrow's episode. And then I will have an episode on Monday. However, I'm going to a wedding this weekend. I'll kind of be out of commission of the podcast for a little bit. There's still going to be an episode Monday, but it's going to be recorded probably here on Thursday or Friday, so it won't be super updated. It won't be a spring training update episode. It'll actually be my bold predictions episode when I do my 3 bold predictions for the Orioles season. That's coming up on Monday. And then on Tuesday, I'll be back with spring training updates. Monday is the final spring training game. It's an exhibition really in DC between the O's and the Nats. So when I'm back on Tuesday, I'll have everything you need to know from the final week of spring training games. And then we'll be getting you ready for Thursday's opening day. So that's kind of what is coming up next on the podcast, including tomorrow with that grading the Orioles offseason episode for a Friday pod. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.